and then intuition led me out of it. I was meant to do that. And maybe it's because I was meant to be here right now telling this story and on podcasts like this, speaking to it in this way. But I got there and it was just louder and louder and louder. And at the time I was, my now husband and I were living back in Western Australia and had amazing friends and family. And I knew that it was my career because every other area of my life felt so great. And yet I felt more unhappy than I'd ever felt in my life. And so there was a moment when we just moved house and we moved down to be by the beach.
This week, we talked to business coach Ellie Swift about creating a soul-led business, the CEO mindset, being of service to people, people's fear of success, and much, much more. Enjoy the episode. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Momentum Lifestyle Podcast by myself, Blake Worrell-Thompson.
And me, Janelle Van Keekum. Momentum is a men's well-being and performance community dedicated to helping men be better.
Each week, we deep dive with your favorite thought leaders and experts from around the world to get their insights to help you be better. Enjoy the episode. Now, guys, before we get started on this week's podcast, I want to talk to you about our Momentum Mastermind. The Mastermind is our 12-month program for men who want to surround themselves with other committed men, all with similar interests, values, and goals. Whether you're looking to build or grow a profitable lifestyle business, develop financial freedom, get in the best shape of your life, or create an intimate and epic relationship, the Mastermind is perfect for those who are looking to have it all. We know that to create these results and this kind of lifestyle on your own can be super challenging. So join now for your free 30-day trial. Simply visit our website, www.themomentumlifestyle.com.au. Click on the programs section at the top, and under that, you'll see our mastermind. Sign up now for your free 30-day trial valued at $1,000, and we look forward to seeing you part of our mastermind. Ellie Swift, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
It's exciting to have you here, and potentially may have a guest appearance from Olive at some stage as well today, which is exciting. I get two for the price of one, which is awesome. Yeah. And at some stage, we're going to talk all things business. But before we do, can you give the guys a 60 to 90 second spiel of your world and what's got you to where you are now?
I feel like I'm on a game show. Okay, 60 to 90 seconds.
See how you go.
So I'm a marketing and business coach. I work with incredible high-performing women who are building soul-led, profitable, sustainable businesses. So I work with coaches and consultants. I am the cliche, worked in corporate, was climbing the corporate ladder, thought that was my dream life, got to a point many of us get to, which is, reached my ultimate role in the corporate world, hated it, felt completely unfulfilled, started studying life coaching on the side, thinking that I'd do that instead. Loved it, started getting asked for business coaching as well because of my marketing experience. I'd worked as a marketer for 10 years, transitioned into business, built up a one-to-one model quite quickly, became gratefully fully booked. So I created a model called the Swift Marketing Method, which was amazing and supported clients really well from the get-go. Transitioned into mastermind model, been in business for 5.5, 6 years, work with incredible women across 3 masterminds who are building to multi-6 and 7 figures. And I love my work. I think that I just am one of the luckiest humans alive. And love supporting other women to create amazing businesses.
You said it 4 or 5 times there, and just to kind of reinforce for other guys who want to work with you, because I've been rejected a few times by you. She works with women only, just as a heads up, guys, because don't make the same mistake that I made of pestering her, but she made it very clear.
I feel like we need to talk about that briefly. So Blake sent me the best DM, and I've got to tell you, if I had space right now, it would be yours because the persistence was so great. Like what was the first thing you spoke? You were like, there's people that keep telling me you're really great. How can I work with you? And I said, don't have space. And quite honestly, like it's less about you being a man and more that I'm just not doing one-to-one. Right. And just so we know, everyone that's listening, like no sexism intended. Yeah. And then you sent me another message and you're like, okay, such and such is telling me that you're really great at this. Any spaces left? And I was like, I really love this approach. Like no wonder you're successful in business.
It almost works. It didn't, but I get it. And I also think it's a great idea to niche. So I respect the boundaries and the niche that you've chosen. I'm going to start with the career move because I love this conversation and speak to a lot of people about it. What was the dialogue, the internal dialogue for you when you're in a corporate environment, you've climbed the ladder, you've ticked the boxes that society tells you to tick? What goes on for you in that moment? Because a lot of people have that kind of fork in the road moment of like, something feels off, but this is what I've been told to do. Like, how was that dialogue for you? And what was that kind of transition like?
So the biggest stories that were coming up for me at that time were all around guilt and shame. So who am I to not be satisfied in this life that I've created for myself? You know, I grew up with parents who worked really hard to, send me to the best possible school. And I very much had created this real high performer mentality. And, you might say that a lot of the stories that I'd built for myself were around success being the thing. And if I do really well and I achieve, then that makes me someone that's worthy of being loved. And so it was a lot of guilt and shame of, I don't want people to think that I'm ungrateful and that I'm not satisfied with this life. But there's this deeper intuitive soul yearning that I have that I just can't ignore. And to be fair, I know that was meant to be my path, Blake, because intuition had led me to that point, and then intuition led me out of it. I was meant to do that. And maybe it's because I was meant to be here right now telling this story and on podcasts like this, speaking to it in this way. But I got there and it was just louder and louder and louder. And at the time I was, my now husband and I were living back in Western Australia and had amazing friends and family. And I knew that it was my career because every other area of my life felt so great. And yet I felt more unhappy than I'd ever felt in my life. And so there was a moment when we just moved house and we moved down to be by the beach. And we were living in an apartment that overlooked the ocean, beautiful apartment. And I was working in my corporate job still. And I had this moment 7 days into being in this new apartment where the entire reason we'd moved there was so I could go for swims in the morning and spend more time by the beach. And I was like, hang on a second. We've been here 7 days and I haven't even put my feet in the sand yet. Like, what kind of life am I living when 7 days go by and I don't do the one thing for me that I truly want to do because I'm spending all my waking hours at a windowless, soulless office that I don't want to be in? And it was somewhat of, like, I call it my living room floor moment. My husband was working away at sea because he was fly in, fly out at the time. And I called him and I said, I don't want to do this anymore. There's got to be another way. This just doesn't feel like the life I want to live. And he said to me, well, I know you, like, you're going to find a way and I support you in that. And I think that it's time that you do leave corporate and look for other opportunities. And so I do what I recommend to my clients, which is I created an exit strategy that made sense, that meant I wasn't taking myself into this fight or flight spiral of how do I make money. So I got a marketing job actually with the Life Coaching Academy that I'd trained at the year prior. And I started doing their social media and I worked that and I earned enough from that to provide for like my share of baseline bills. Quit my job, started booking up my coaching books from there, and then obviously slowly transitioned out of that into full-time.
Nailed it. It's interesting what you went through, and I dare say a lot of people go through a similar thing, of which I went through as well. It's almost like you gaslight yourself with gratitude to drown out the whisper of a deeper calling or soul's purpose. And I don't know if you tried this, I know I did, of exactly the same guilt and shame of I should be more grateful. I should be more grateful. And I'd almost try to like drown out that whisper with gratitude. And I get the feeling a lot of people kind of go through the same thing. Is that kind of your experience with the people that you work with?
Totally agree with that. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because, for many of us, probably for everyone that's listening, we have an element of privilege in our lives. And so I think that in some ways, it's a great thing to be grateful, but there's a big difference between having genuine gratitude for the life that you're living and actually being deeply unhappy. But as you say, gaslighting yourself and pretending that it's something that it's not. And so this is where we really need to ask ourselves those intuitive questions of, is this the life that I thought that I was meant to be living, or is it a life that I'm actually wanting to live? Because there's a very big difference in that. And sometimes you don't know until you get there. So there's a very big difference between visualizing this dream life that might look, or, your mind perceives it to be incredible, but is that actually the thing that your soul is seeking? Because often they're going to be two very different things.
How would someone start to define a soul-led business? And if they're not in that space yet, how can they define what isn't a soul-led business?
So a soul-led business is one where your business is born out of a desire or a yearning that isn't related to, I want to find a way to make more money, or I want to find a way to make money that isn't me being tied to my corporate desk, or I want to work with clients and go and live a laptop lifestyle. And look, none of those things are wrong. But in my experience, they all come as the result of, first and foremost, tapping into what do I truly want to do? How do I truly want to serve? How can I support people? And when you're asking those questions instead, the outcome usually will be the thing that then leads to max abundance lifestyle that you want to live. And I've seen this, having worked with thousands of women and some men, that I feel like I need to rub it in every now and again, that, anyone that comes to me, and it's like an X factor that you could spot. If someone comes to me and they're like, I just have this desire to serve in this way, I really want to support people with this, I'm just so lit up when I help people in, whatever way it is, it's so easy for me to be like, you're going to be successful, because you can see that really strong, Simon Sinek calls it finding your why, that really strong why, that really strong soul desire, that really strong, I want to serve, I want to do something for someone, because business is all about helping people solve their problems. And so if we don't have a desire to serve and support people in some way, we're probably not going to do super well in business. So if you start there, instead of asking yourself the question of how do I make money? How do I make more money? How do I do what Blake does and go to Thailand and chill out, by the beach? You're doing that because you started with, how do I serve?
When you come, it can be as simple and as hard as that for a lot of people in terms of how can I serve and how do I create a solution for the problem. Where does someone start with that process?
So at which point, when they're maybe still, let's say they're still working in the soulless job right now? Yeah. So the thing that I would say right now in this moment is to just start by getting really curious and to start with becoming more aware of what thoughts you're thinking and how you're feeling in your body every single day. Because what I find is that, similar to the way that we gaslight ourselves with gratitude, we can often gaslight how we're truly feeling and what we truly want, because we think that maybe it's too hard or we don't have examples of it around us. And this is coming from someone who started my business when I had no examples in my immediate reality of anyone else who'd done what I'd done. Social media was the window to all my manifesting power. And so just allow yourself to go to those places that maybe you're not letting your mind go to right now. What might it look like if you didn't work your current job? What might it look like if you were instead running a business? What might it look like if you led a lifestyle where you were doing a morning routine that was slow, and then you worked at your desk between 10 and 3, and then you knocked off and went to the pub with your mates? What might that look like? And so if you give yourself the scope to dream a little bigger and get outside of, your current thinking, and that might look like, going to a retreat or spending time somewhere differently on the weekends, getting yourself out of your existing environment, asking those questions, it's going to feel hard because there's probably answers buried in there that you don't want to find, because that means that once you uncover them, you perhaps know that you need to take action. And that's the hardest bit of all of this. And there'll be so much resistance around that. But it starts with that awareness and giving yourself permission to ask those questions and dive deeper into that process. Because ultimately, if you don't, you're deciding that you're happy living this existing reality forever. And so if that's what you want to do, great. But if you're listening to this podcast, it's probably not what you want.
It's not what they want. So when you think, and obviously you've worked with a lot of people, when you think about a sustainable business and a non-sustainable business, and no doubt there's elements that everyone has at an individual in terms of what's sustainable for the individual, but what do you see as a sustainable business for the coach, for the entrepreneur, and even for you on an individual level? What's a sustainable business for you?
Probably help if I give some examples maybe of my journey here. So I've learned what sustainable is by having pockets within my business journey where I've gone into really unsustainable territory. So for example, in my first year of business, when I became fully booked with one-to-ones, I think at my biggest, I had something like 27 one-to-one clients that I was working with. And it's a lot, right? And I, in that moment, was like, can I move through every season of my life that I want to, with this being my current reality? Absolutely not. Like, this means that my life is my work forevermore. And so hopefully, in kind of sharing that example, creating a sustainable business means that you're creating a model that's going to support you in your life and not the other way around. So, I work with a lot of people who are navigating, for example, seasons of pregnancy and motherhood and postpartum. And, I've got clients who on the flip side of that are navigating things like elderly parents and seasons where it's like, where life is going to require a lot from us. And how can we create a business that's going to support our life through all its seasons? And so if you're thinking in that entrepreneur mindset when you're first starting of just like more is better, more, you're not necessarily going to make smart decisions. And we were talking about this off air a little bit just before, where it can be so easy to go, well, I see all these people on social media doing amazing things. Why can't I just keep making more, like 7-figure, multi-7-figure, whatever that is? And that's great. And that might feel like a sole purpose for you of creating that. But if you're looking to do that in a way where you're not factoring in, well, can I sustain this in all different seasons of my life? Then that's going to be an unsustainable business. So the way that I work with my clients is, we'll have sprints. Like, there's definitely going to be a sprint where maybe you go through a launch period, or you decide you're having a year where you're all in on your business. Because the reality is, in the first 1 to 3 years, as you know, business requires a lot from you. And so I think that's a really important point to make here as well, is that we're talking about sustainable business being for the long haul, but you will be required to work your ass off in those first couple of years. There's just no two ways around it. And then, so once you've created this business, it's like, how can you mold it to be something that you can ebb and flow in throughout all those seasons? So it's really about creating a model that's going to work for you and your life. And that looks different for everybody because everyone has different strengths. Everyone has different lifestyle. But it's working out what that looks like for you and then consciously creating that, rather than just getting into the hamster wheel of business and creating a model that you actually hate, which I've seen many, many times over.
When you think about your own journey, I think if I heard correctly, it was 6 years. How has that changed in terms of your maybe, years 1 to 3 and then kind of 4 to 6? How's that changed for you? And what would your week look like now?
Yeah, I love this question. So when I first started, when I was working one-to-one coaching, I was doing 5 days a week calls, a lot of calls, a lot of time spent on Zoom. Surprised I still have 20/20 vision at this point. And then when I went into years 2, year 3, I was transitioning into a mastermind group program model at that point. And so because I was growing quite quickly still, so I think year 2 full-time, we did year 1, we did 20K, year 2, we did 120K, year 3, we did 300. And then year 4, I think we did 600. Yes, that's right. Around that. I'm giving estimates, obviously. And there was obviously, because there was quite a lot of growth, like most of it was year on year, we doubled. It was still a lot because I was obviously up leveling the business and then having to create systems at every stage to accommodate the new level of growth. So the first 3 years were big. My husband and I have conversations about it now where we're like, I worked really hard in those first few years. At the time, I might have said that I wasn't, because I was just so happy and so in it. There's one moment of burnout that I definitely had in that first year when I was taking on all those one-to-one clients. But after that, I got that balance of things feeling more aligned to my energy. And then from there, the last, say 2 years, I've focused a lot more on creating something that feels really good day to day. Like I've settled into my business. So to answer your question about how my weeks look right now. So I can give you the specifics of this, and I always find it really interesting.
I love this stuff.
So I'm going to.
Yeah.
Me too. So I see clients Tuesdays to Thursdays. So I don't take any calls Mondays or Fridays. And I have every 4th week completely off calls. So 3 weeks on, 1 week completely off calls. And calls only Tuesday to Thursday. And so it's set up in our monthly schedule where week 1 is group calls. Week 2 is my one-to-one VIP client calls. Week 3 is group calls. Week 4 is off.
I like that. And for you, when it comes to a sustainable business or even a lifestyle business, however you kind of position it, what does time look like outside of those? So is Monday and Friday completely off? Is it a CEO day? What happens outside those 3 days?
So Monday and Friday, they're a combination of CEO and content creation. But they're also the days where things are a lot slower. So I would say Monday's more my CEO and content creation day. And usually Friday's a half day, but often it's a full day. It's usually a day where I'll go get a massage or a facial or whatever. And it's just way more chill. So I would say right now I do around about 4 days a week. But my hours vary within those days. So I'll take, on the call days, I'll usually take around 4 hours of calls. And then I might do like 2 hours of things outside of that as well. So I try and keep all my admin response stuff within that Tuesday to Thursday. So Mondays and Fridays feel really, really spacious.
When it comes to building a business, I always find it really interesting, the difference in both mindset and skill set that's developed over that kind of period. What do you see as the difference in terms of your mindset over the last 6 years and potentially the filters in which you see the world and also how you see your business?
Such a good question. The biggest challenge that new business owners have is that you're trying to create everything without any evidence. And so, for anyone that's listening that's in really early stages of business, just really seeing you in that. And I always just share that so much with my early stage business owners. Like, it's a big season. Like, let's just honor that it's big and it's tough. There's a reason why most businesses don't get off the ground. So that's really challenging. The mindset that you really need to be in those first few years, I'm laughing because you basically need to be deluded. Like, you need to be able to live in the manifestation of what you're creating, because it's not in the 3D world yet. It's not come to life. You've got to decide that what you see in your mind or, in like your soul calling, you've got to be able to act from that place because it's not there in the real world. Whereas nowadays, I guess the biggest difference is that I'm operating from a lot of evidence has been created. So the amount of self-trust that I have now in my decision-making, in my recommendations to clients, in the way that I show up, it's validated, it's substantiated. So it's so much easier for me to really own that thought leader, point of view. The things that I recommend to my clients around mindset is a really big one is CEO mindset at all stages. And I would say that that's the thing that I've always tried to anchor into at every stage is, if I want to build an incredible business, I need to be thinking like the CEO of a business, and I need to be acting as the CEO of a business. And at every stage, I've talked about that in different ways. So, nowadays I'm always like, as a 7-figure CEO, like, what does my day look like? What do things look like? I'm operating from that place. At the start, before I made 6 figures, I would always be asking myself the question of like, who is a 6-figure CEO? Who's a multi-6-figure CEO? Like, how do I show up as that person? Again, it's that process of manifestation, of acting as though it already is, right? So I would really always focus on showing up from that place and deciding that I was making decisions as the CEO of my business. And so really practically speaking, to give you an example of what CEO mindset is and how I describe it, there's a very big difference in making decisions as me, Ellie, the human, versus me, Ellie, the CEO of my company, Swift Ventures. So if I was making decisions right now as Ellie, the human, and you said to me, what do you want to do for the rest of, like, what are you going to do for the rest of your day? I'd be like, I'm going to go for a swim and I'm going to have like a really lazy lunch. And no, I've got a couple of calls. And then outside of that, I'm just going to really like enjoy my life. Whereas if you said, what does the rest of your day look like? And I've got my CEO hat on, I'd be like, okay, I have calls and then I've got things that need to get done in the business and I'm going to aim to wrap it up by 4:00 today. And that, like I'm thinking about things differently. And so really putting deciding that you're operating as a CEO is going to mean that you show up for your business in a whole different way. You're going to be making decisions based on being a business owner rather than being just like a thinking, feeling human, because our business doesn't run well if we run it off our feelings. We need to really be making decisions as the CEO. So that's the biggest mindset that I guess has carried me through my whole journey, and it's shifted and changed as I've up-leveled.
One of the things that you speak of there, which I'd be really interested with you having worked with so many people, whether this shows up, is a shift in identity, which for a lot of people holds them back because they're still stuck in coach person as opposed to CEO person. What have you noticed in terms of people's inability to shift on an identity level and how that potentially affects their business? That might be quite a challenging question, but have you noticed anything with that?
Yeah. I think that identity is like the very essence of most things. And I'll give you an example of this. So I had a group coaching call last night with an incredible client who, she's such a gun when it comes to all things strategy, and she's building this amazing business. She's a business coach as well. She's incredible. We were talking about everything, and I could just feel in her demeanor that like the way she was acting wasn't matching the mindset or the energy that she needed to be in to attract the level of client that she wanted to attract. And so the conversation that we had was basically like, okay, we really need to look at what's holding you back from owning being this person that you are, on paper and pitching and positioning yourself as, and like what's stopping you from truly owning that. And we then started talking about how for her, it was like there was some self-trust stuff coming up for her. And that was a result of some things that had occurred in her life. And so in sharing that story, I guess what I'm saying is, yes, like identity is everything. And if you're not owning that person that you need to be, you're going to hold yourself back in so many ways. And so I think for anyone that's listening, the way to mitigate that is to ask yourself that question of like, what's the identity that I need to hold to create what it is that I want to create? Which is why I would always be like, who is the 6-figure version of me? Who is the multi-6-figure version of me? And I asked a client this question yesterday, and there was immediately a shift in her demeanor when I asked her this question. I said, who is 6-figure you? And she was like, I'm more disciplined. I'm smarter with my time. Like she instantly spoke to habits and ways of being and showing up in her business that was different to how she was operating. And so you could hear from that example as well. Like if you decide you're owning a new identity, it's naturally going to then shift your habits, your behaviors, how you show up, which will in turn bring about what it is that you want to create. I love how so much of what we're talking about right now is essentially manifestation. You know, these are all the tidbits and ways of bringing about what it is that you want to create in your life.
What do you notice, having worked with so many women, because to a certain degree, they're getting delivered the same tools, resources, insights, other than some people's inability to potentially shift that identity? What are you noticing in terms of the bigger blocks that stop people growing quickly from 6 figures to multi-6 and potentially 7?
Yeah. Visibility mindset is a massive one, like being comfortable and feeling safe with being seen. So obviously I teach strategy in the how, and, you know, there's a lot of people in the online space saying, doesn't matter about the how. It matters about the how. Like you need to know what you're doing. I know we spoke about strategy off air before this, like you need to know what it is that you're doing. Otherwise you're going to run in circles. So the how is absolutely important. So if you don't actually know how you're building to multi-6 or 7 figures, like get a coach that's going to support you to do that, because you need the practicalities around your model and your marketing and your strategy around all of that. But then, you know, 90% of it is the mindset piece. So I spoke at the top of this call about my method that I teach, which is the Swift marketing method. And so within that, I teach that marketing strategy and mindset, I believe, are the key pillars to building a sustainable, soul-led, profitable business. And that mindset part is like, as we spoke about before, visibility stuff that comes up. It's also, well, really the identity conversation that we've had just now is another really big one. I would say that there's a lot around, and this ties into visibility, but there's a lot around like having to really release the person that you have been and the fear of what you're going to lose in that. And I've even had that. I've had those moments as well. So things like fear about growing loved ones. I remember, and Shay and I talk about this, a really defining moment where I was growing and I had this moment of, if my husband decides that he's not going to keep growing with me, there's going to come a fork in the road. And am I able to keep forging forward, risking that, but deeply trusting that we're meant to be together in this lifetime? And we didn't talk about it at the time, but we talk about it in hindsight now, where we both were having that thought process in our brains at the time, where he was going, I know I need to keep up here and I want to, because it feels really aligned for me too. And for me, I was like, I really hope that he does. So there's a lot of that. There's a lot of growing pains in all of it, and deciding that you're really willing to embrace that next level version of yourself. They would be the key things.
There's a lot in what you just said. And you work with a lot of women in business in particular, but I assume it crosses over into personal.
Yeah.
And for me, working with women, that's the number one fear and the number one struggle of like, can I sustain this relationship if I value growth as high as I do? And he doesn't. And it's interesting because I've been asked that question probably over 100 times, and I don't have a succinct answer for it, other than to have aligned values does make life a hell of a lot easier.
100% agree. Look, there's so much I want to say on this. I'll try and keep it brief, but just to add to that, so there's 2 key things here. The first is, for any women listening who are in that situation right now, like your hubby or your partner or whoever, if you're in a, heteronormative relationship, does not need to meet you every step of the way. If you love going to cacao ceremonies right now and you're doing ice baths and like that's the path you're on and they're not into it, that doesn't mean they're not for you. So there's a whole like like spiritual hierarchy bullshit around this that we really, really need to like stop buying into. There's so many things that I still do that my husband's not into. Like I pull angel cards every morning and there's still moments where he teases me. It doesn't matter. I just got to trust myself that it supports me. But as you said so beautifully right now, I think that it's really important though, that there's an honoring and a support of one another during that time. It doesn't mean there won't be moments, because they're probably going to be afraid as well that you're going to outgrow them. So they might have moments of resistance, but are they open? Are they curious around the journey that you're going on? And then there's a third thing as well, actually, which is that ultimately it's what you said. You need to be aligned on your values overall. And that's the most important part. So, when I think about spirituality, for example, that's like a deep, deep part of my being. My husband is very spiritual, but he wouldn't identify as someone where it's that overt part of the spiritual community identity. And that's not important to me. What's important to me are our values of family, and our values around, the vision that we have for our future, and our loved ones, and how we want to show up for them in our life. Like that's way more important to me. And so just really looking at like what's truly important to you versus, maybe you're just part of like a new scene right now and you're seeing other guys who are like really into that spiritual scene. And actually that's a bit of a grass is greener right in this moment. It's really easy to get caught up in that. And I've seen a lot of people ask themselves whether their partner's right for them because they've got caught up in that. And it's taken them some time to come around, and they've nearly lost, the person they're meant to be with, and vice versa. I mean, what do you see? Like,
I've seen a lot of that. Exactly. Yeah. And I still come back to, and it's such a tough one, but I still do come back to like the grass is green is where you water it, and it's, I mean, there's a line, you want to be aligned and all of those things, and like how much you water in it.
Totally.
And I do think, with Shani in particular, and Dr. Demartini talks about this a lot. He's like, travel the world if you need to in order to find someone with similar values, because it makes life so much easier. And I really do stand by that as kind of the overarching theme when it comes to that. And I'm in a position now where, rightly or wrongly, I am probably a little bit less empathetic to guys that aren't prepared to do the work these days. Like every fucking bloke should be doing the work on some level to grow, evolve, heal for themselves. Cool. First and foremost. And for your partner, for your kids, for your work colleagues. Like I think there's a real opening, albeit I'm slightly biased and in this filter bubble with other men. So I see it everywhere, but I do think over the last kind of 2 to 4 years in particular, there has been an opening of more and more blokes doing the work. And again, it doesn't have to look a certain way, because we're all kind of doing our own thing. But if you're working on improving yourself in your own way, I think that's important. And, again, I'm mindful of the bubble that I'm in, but I've yet to find a female who's like, that isn't sexy.
100%.
Do yourself a favor.
Yeah. And I think you described so well, like there's a difference between doing the work and like this stereotype of like the conscious male. And so I think you just articulated that so well of like, ladies, don't go looking for like the archetype of the conscious male, because you might find somebody who maybe just has like a lot of unhealed shit and you don't actually want to go there. Find somebody who is actually connected to themselves, doing the inner work, as you say.
Yeah.
It's a very different man, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I'm in elements of those worlds. And what I would say, because I've made the same mistake numerous times, is just be careful who you're putting on a pedestal, because there's a lot of unhinged, unintegrated behavior that happens in the spiritual world and a lot of bypassing. So just keep your head level when it comes to what you see on social or what you see from the outside. Because again, not from a cynical place, but just from a place of discernment when you're going into those circles. You spoke of something super valuable, and again, I don't think it gets enough airtime, is the fear of success. And you spoke about, I think it was judgment, or you used the word visibility mindset, which I've never heard, and I really like that.
Take it.
Thank you. I will. I'll reference you. What else is in that fear of success? And one thing you spoke of, and it's really interesting how that crosses across different areas, is fear of disconnection with your partner. And in the health and fitness space, I found a lot of this. So I used to run a 6-week program, and the amount of women, once I actually got to the root cause of why they didn't want to feel, look, be sexier, was fear of like, what happens when I attract more interest? How does that change the dynamic of me and my partner? It goes unspoken for me. But what have you noticed about fear of success when it comes to the women that you work with?
So there's this really amazing book called Existential Kink by Carolyn Elliott. For anyone that's really interested in this topic that we're talking about, I'd highly recommend reading that. I don't know if I'm going to do this justice in my explanation, but basically the crux of it is like, she speaks to this exact thing of we say we want something, but there's this, like, she describes it as like, there's this kinky, weird part of us that actually doesn't want it because it's easier to stay in the muck. It's easier for us to stay in this reality that we know we're safe there. And, the way that I would talk about that is like, that's what our brain knows. And it's safer to be in that rather than, stepping out of our comfort zone. And so that's really the thing here, is like, if you know you want something, ask yourself, like, what is it that's holding me back? What am I afraid of? Because it will be those things. It will probably be some version of, I'm afraid that people are going to leave me, or that people aren't going to love me if I'm more shiny. Like, I definitely had a story for a while there around like, I'm going to lose my women because they're not going to love me if I'm shining. They're not going to love me as much. We might have worry about our families thinking that think that we're some kind of like amazing hot shot, and they're going to distance themselves for us. I'm speaking to my own versions of
it's
this
common
now.
Exactly what you're speaking to. I've heard it lots of times.
We are probably going to fear that maybe we'll make money and then we can't hold it, or like, how do we even know how to make money? What does it look like when you get everything you want? Like, what if it's not as good there as you think it is right now? Then does that mean everything you've ever thought is true in life is suddenly not? Like, that's a big existential fear. So I think I'm kind of answering your question, kind of not. Basically all of it. And I've felt all of it, and I've seen all of it. And the key thing is to, again, just not be afraid to go there and identify what it is, and then make the decision of, well, am I still willing to risk it? Like, am I willing to risk it all? Because really, we could sugarcoat it and we could say, like, do the mindset work to support yourself through it. But ultimately, if you're wanting to build a business, it's actually about risk. Like, it's actually about risk. And then the other part of that, which I haven't spoken a lot about, but it is a really big part of, the way I live my life, is like, there's a trust and a faith component. So for me, I'm not into organized religion. For me, there's a really, really big trust and belief in the fact that there's a universal energy, and I'm in constant co-creation with that. And that faith and that trust is the thing that really supports me to make moves, because I just believe that I'm held. And I think it's really important to share when we're talking about this, that there is an element of privilege in this conversation. As a white woman who's had a pretty privileged life, I just really want to acknowledge that, because I think that, again, speaking to spiritual bypassing, like when we talk about trusting in universal energy, if you're listening to this and you're like, I don't trust, that's totally okay. And we all have different life experiences, and that might not be something that supports you, but it's definitely a big part of my belief system, and something that allows me to take those risks without fear, because I believe that I'm on a path, and no matter what happens, I'm going to fulfill that path.
I'm mindful of your time. I know you've got other places to be after this. So,
I go there with like the massive co-creation conversation right before we're wrapping up. I'm not really helping you.
Drop. We'll come back. We'll come back for a round 2, I reckon.
I'm here for that.
For those that want to explore you, the work that you do, and if they're female, potentially want to work with you, where's the best spot for them to find
Did
you?
you just hear that passive aggression? Everyone that's listening, there was a little tone in it.
I'm going to do some pillow punching after just to release it.
Thank you. I've loved this conversation so much. I'm so glad we got to connect. You can jump on over and find me. If you're listening to this podcast, obviously means you like audio. So come on over to my podcast, Shine Online with Ellie Swift. You can also jump on over and find me. I'm usually most chatty in Instagram. Send me a DM at Ellie H Swift. Let me know what you loved about this episode. Guys or gals, like my DMs are open to you.
Perfect.
So however you identify, whatever it is, gender fluid, I got you. Like come on into my DMs and say hi there.
Unreal, Ellie. Been good to chat, and we'll get you back on.
Would love that. Thanks so much, Blake.